بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد قائد الغر المحجلين وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا بفيض فضلك رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah. In our lessons on Imam Ibrahim al-Halabi's Multaqa al-Abhur, we are continuing to look at the rulings on transactions, and we are completing the discussion today on trust sales. We had a little bit of a hiccup last class, but alhamdulillah, we're in the process of recovering from that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And so today we're going to be completing this discussion on trust sales, but also looking at the issue of what happens to some details related to the item of sale and the price, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And one of the important things that trust sales highlight for us is the issue of the general importance of amana, of trust when it comes to transactions. Right? So, and also that there's a spiritual test when it comes to these transactions, in that sometimes your worldly interest goes against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to, for example, being honest about the price of the item over here. But in those situations, one has to remember the divine call that وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, that truly the next life is better for you than this. And this is the amr of the deen. Amrud deen, right, is that you use your aql to make the call of the hereafter prevail over the call of the dunya in your life. The call of the dunya and the call of one's whim and the other elements. So these are some of the lesson outcomes. You can see them on your screen. So we're going to also look at these key concepts related to murabaha, tawliya, and dealing with the item of sale. And that's very, very practical. There's a lot of errors that happen with that in common day-to-day purchases as well. So let's begin with this section again, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So he tells us, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, regarding the buyur al-amana, that وَمَنْ شَرَى شَيْئًا بِعَشَرَةٍ فَبَاعَهُ ب15 ثُمَّ شَرَاهُ ثَانِيًا ب10 يُرَابِحُ عَلَى الخمسة. So if someone buys something for 10 and then sells it for 15 and then buys it back for 10, right, you can only make murabaha on it on 5, because you've earned the profit of 5 already in that presumed sale. It could be a real case, and it could be a case of just trying to circumvent the rulings. وَإِنِ اشْتَرَاهُ ثَانِيًا بِخَمْسَةٍ لَا يُرَابِحْ. And if you bought it back for 5, then you cannot sell it with murabaha. Why? Because this way you could otherwise create a fake sale, to a fake second sale, just for the purpose of making the price, making it seem like a better deal for the buyer. وعندهما يرابح على الثمن الأخير مطلقا. And according to the Sahibain, you can make murabaha on the second sale. Some of the ulama took this position of the Sahibain, and particularly when there is no evident, if this is the custom of the land, that they do this, and it's not being used to avoid It's not being used to deceive people or cheat people, then there's leeway in their position. But the position of Imam Abu Hanifa is more precautious. And that's the general cases we see in mu'amalat. Then he tells us, rahimahullah ta'ala, that وإن اشترى مأذون مديون بعشرة وباع من سيده ب15 أو بالعكس يرابح على العشرة. And the reason being that there's a tuhma. There is that even though the ma'zun is one who's been given trust, so you cannot make murabaha in this, based on the second transaction. And والمضارب بالنصف لو شرى ب10 وباع من رب المال ب15 يرابح رب المال على 12 ونصف. So the mudaraba, which is something that is coming up in a little bit, the mudaraba is a transaction where it's from darb fil ard. Right? So one party, which is the Rabbul Mal, is providing the capital, whereas the Mudarib is the one who is the working partner. So you have an investing partner, that's the Rabbul Mal, and you have the working partner who does the buying and selling, and they've agreed to share the profits in an agreed upon manner. We'll see it there, but they are partners. So in this scenario, if the mudarib, the working partner, if they purchased for 10, and then لو شرى, they purchased for 10, and they sold to the Rabbul Mal, the investing partner, for 15, then, but their profits are shared between them. So the Rabbul Mal would be able to sell that item for 12.5, his share of the price. Okay. You subtract the other party's profit, basically. وَإِنِ اشْتَرَى مَأْذُونٌ مَدْيُونٌ بِعَشَرَ وَبَاعَ مِنْ سَيِّدِهِ. This is the same issue, sorry. What happens if defects arise? And the practical reality here is that there are defects. If defects occur in a sale, what right does the buyer have? What is the overarching right that the buyer has if there's a defect in the sale? Sadati? What is that called? Like if you buy something and there's a defect in it. Yeah, khiyarul aib, right? There is khiyarul aib. And those of you can turn on your mic, please, Sayyid Abdul Latif, please do so, inshallah. So there is khiyarul aib, right? The option of that affect the matter but would not necessarily entail a defect. Do you have to disclose all of it? So in the ideal case, you would disclose everything. But imagine, you bought some watermelons. Now, if you got 10 watermelons. You dropped one on the ground. It came up, but it seems fine. Just to give a approximated example before we look at this. Do you have to tell the guy, by the way, that watermelon fell on the ground? It's otherwise seems fine. Do you have to tell that, oh, by the way, someone sneezed on that watermelon, I cleaned it? Do you have to mention everything?
No.
Do I have to mention everything regarding the transaction? No. Right? Practically, because otherwise it would hurt the party. If the item is fine, like this watermelon, some lady came, she sneezed on it. Now I cleaned it, it's gone. I don't have to disclose that. Anyone else having issues with the sound, Sadati?
It's better now. I think maybe it fixed itself.
Ya Rab. Just hold on a second. Okay. I hope it'll be better now, inshallah. Bismillah. So this is the context, right? That there's certain things that may be undesirable, but they're not ultimately defects. And they don't have to be disclosed. If it constitutes a aib, are you allowed to sell without disclosing the aib?
No.
Are you allowed to sell without disclosing the aib?
No.
In general. We'll see, do not constitute aib. If it is a aib, you have to disclose it as a aib. So let's see. So these are things that, though perhaps undesirable, would not constitute a aib. ويرابح بلا بيان لو اعورت المبيعة أو وطئت وهي ثيب أو أصاب الثوب قرصة فأر أو حرق نار. Right? So one does not have to, one can make murabaha without disclosing if the item being sold loses partial eyesight. Because let's say cattle that's for sale for meat, whether it can see with one eye or two, does it affect the quality of the meat?
No.
No, right? So it's not necessarily a aib. But if you go disclose it, Masir, I'll sell you this cow for this much, but by the way, a cow that became blind? No. Right? So that's the point of concern, right? That you don't have to disclose, but what's important here, this is not in itself a aib in what's being sold, right? أو وطئت وهي ثيب, or in the case of the Emma, she had intercourse, but she is a thayyib. She was not a bikr. Right? So it's not a aib. أو أصاب الثوب قرض, right? قرض فأر, right? So a mouse, took a bite from the cloth, but it does not constitute a aib. Around on they bit here and there, but nothing happened that constitutes a aib. So this does not, so it's not a desirable thing, but it is not a aib, so you can make murabaha on it without disclosing these things. And things like this are difficult to avoid, especially you have a large quantity of items. It'd be very difficult to avoid. You just imagine, especially an open air market, to avoid these kinds of things taking place. Okay. Or harqu nar, right? Or, if it was affected by fire. Like, for example, there's a clay pot, there's a little bit of fire, but it's not reached the had of aib. So you don't have to disclose things that are not aib in this situation. If it's anything that would make the item undesirable, if there's anything that would make the item undesirable by market standards, then we would take the position of Imam Abu Yusuf, which would be, so if it affects the wasf of the matter, because there's a difference between something being sound, something having a aib, and something that affects the desirability of the item. It lost its color, right? So you're buying a blue turban, but it was in the rain, so the blue color got weaker. Because some of the dye washed off. So it's not a aib, but this is a desired quality. So if it affects the wasf that was sought, then Abu Yusuf said that you have to, if it affects, and this would be akin to khiyarul wasf, meaning that an option of cancellation due to a sought after quality not being present. So basically, the summary of the issue here is that things that occur to the item of sale that do not affect the market value do not have to be disclosed. But if they affect its quality, then if it's affect its quality, its key attributes, then you would have to disclose. One example of that in our times would be that customarily, is there a difference in price between an unused item and one that was used? That's an open box item. So you wanted to buy a power bank, a small compact power bank. Would there be a difference between a brand new one and one that was returned? Someone bought it and they returned it. It's open box, right? Now, is it being open box a aib in itself?
No, but different in price.
Is there any defect in it?
No.
No, there isn't any defect in it. However, there's a difference between there not being a defect in it and it being desirable. If you're buying a gift for your child's graduation and you bought a fancy tech gadget, would they be as excited about it if it was a refurbished item? No, right? So in those cases, one would need to disclose that, by the way, this is a refurbished item. Why? Because in our times, the difference between a new item, an open box item, a refurbished item, even if they're ostensibly the same, does it affect its desirability customarily? Sadati?
Yes.
Yes, it does. So that's why one has to make bayan of it. If you look in the commentaries, Abu Yusuf said that if it's a quality that is desirable, This is called وصف مرغوب عادة. يعني وصف مرغوب عادة, right? So if that quality that is customarily desired is missing, then you'd have to tell them, right? In our times, for example, it being new versus open box versus refurbished, for example. And this was chosen by Abu Layth al-Samarqandi. It was chosen in Fath al-Qadir and others as well. So that's one practical thing. That's why murabaha sales it's better to be careful about them. Okay. So then he tells us, rahimahullah ta'ala, that وَإِن فُقِئَتْ عَيْنُهَا أو وطئت وهي بكر أو كسر أو تكسر الثوب من طيه ونشره لزم البيان. However, if the وطئت وهي بكر, right? Or if the Emma was a bikr, a virgin, and someone had intercourse with her, or the garment was actually ripped, right? Because of its folding and stretching, then you have to inform that this is what happened to the item. Okay. Right? One, because by intentional action, and this is also resembles the عيب. وإن اشترى بنسيئة ورابح بلا بيان خير المشتري. If the seller had purchased the item on deferred sale, and when entered into a murabaha contract, but did not say that this price that I paid was due to was on a deferred sale, because is a deferred sale the same price as paying up front? No, right? It's not. So in this kind of scenario, it would cause a misimpression, because the seller in a murabaha, let's say the item's market price is $100, but you purchased it for $125 on installments, right? Deferred payment. You're paying 12 installments for that, $10 each, so for $120. Now, if you sell it on murabaha to someone, and say, okay, I'm selling it for $150, given that as a murabaha sale, on condition that I got it for $120, you have to say I got it for $120 deferred price, because the market price was $100. So you have to make that clear, because the person will say, oh, that's a good price. You bought it for $120, I'm only paying $150. But no, you paid $120 because it was deferred. So you have to make bayan of that. Right? And there, if one did not make bayan, right, did not explain that you bought it on deferred payment, nasi'a, ta'jil, deferred payment, then the mushtari, the buyer, has the khiyar, the option of cancellation. فإن أتلفه ثم علم لزم كل ثمنه. But فإن أتلفه, if the buyer in the murabaha sale, destroyed the item, used it, consumed it, the sale was the original price that was mentioned in the murabaha was for the price by deferral, then he has to pay the whole price because he'd agreed to that price. And he says وَكَذَا التَّوْلِيَةِ, and the same rulings apply to the tawliya, to the at par price as well. Then he tells us rahimahullah ta'ala, وَلَوْ اشْتَرَى ثَوْبَيْنِ صَفْقَةً كُلًّا بِخَمْسَةٍ, if one buys two garments, both of them for, one buys two garments in one contract. And what's the key principle here? According to Imam Abu Hanifa, when is the contract considered two? If you buy two things in a contract, when is it considered one item of sale vis-a-vis
separate ijab and qabuls?
Separate ijab and qabul. Because when people bundle things, it reduces the price. So here, the scenario is that one purchased two garments, safqatan wahida, in one contract. Kullan bi khamsa, each for 5. Now when you mention the price separately, what do the sahibain say about this? That if you mention the price of each separately according to the sahibain, what happens here? It's considered, if you mention in one contract, if you mention the price of each item, then this is considered ta'addud al-safqa. These are separate deals. But according to Imam Abu Hanifa, if you bought two items in one transaction, even if their price was mentioned separately, كُرِهَ بَيْعُ أَحَدِهِمَا مُرَابَحَةً بِخَمْسَةٍ بِلَا بَيَانٍ. It is disliked to sell one of them for its price without making it known that I bought it for this much as part of a bundle. Okay, so what a scenario of that would be that, let's say you got these nice merino wool socks from whatever company, Taqwa Toes, merino wool socks. You bought a package of 12 merino wool socks for $200. Now, each individual pair, so there you got, let's say 10 for $200. So it's $20 each. Fancy merino wool socks. On their own, they're $25. But because you bought them as a bundle, it's disliked to sell them without mentioning that this was part of a bundle. And that's not necessarily the best example. A better example would be if, let's say someone bundled a printer into something and they say, well, the market value of the printer is $100. But it's not selling for that much right now. We just added this to the sale to make the computer's price look good. So in those scenarios, if you bought something in a bundle, selling it in murabaha should make sure that, well, I got this as part of a bundle. I bought this in bulk. Because sometimes people will try to make the deal look better. So when they're buying from their wholesaler, they say, could you make the price of this look better? Right? Because they're selling it on. So there will be the element of dishonesty. Okay. وَمَنْ وَلَّى بِمَا قَامَ عَلَيْهِ وَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ مشتريه قدره فسد. Right? If one ومن ولى أي باع تولية. So someone who sells in an at par sale, right? تولية, for what I paid for it, right? What I paid for it. But one did not make clear how much that cost was. This sale is fasid. So the scenario here would be if you said, I'll sell you 10 of these battery packs at my cost. I won't make any profit on them. But I did not mention what the cost is. Say, well, I'll get my guys to calculate the cost. Say, okay, I'll pay whatever it is. Didn't they agree on paying whatever it is? Didn't the buyer here agree on paying whatever the cost is?
He agreed, but it's unknown.
He agreed, but it's unknown. So therefore, what would happen? It would lead to dispute. Right? So you cannot do that. إلا تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم. The thing to do in those scenarios is we say, okay, you like that? Okay. So we agree, we have an agreement. We have an agreement. Okay, sure, good. But that would be considered an agreement. Let's make the sale once the price is defined. So it's just adding that extra step to keep things clear and to avoid dispute. And then finally he says, وإن علمه في المجلس أي إن علم ما يعني ما قام عليه في المجلس خير. And if the person knows what the cost was in the majlis, there is khiyar. He has the option of cancellation. Right? So within the majlis, before they part, the seller says, "Oh, they've called me from the warehouse. Our cost for this, which is what they got it for, plus the additional cost was such and such." He has the option within the majlis to either accept or not accept. And under the lesson we've given, this is called the option of deception. The option of okay, is it better now? Bismillah. The option of deception. Please be careful.
I will. Okay, I'll do dry now. What?
Bismillah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allah. Okay. So there's the option of overcharging or what's called deceptive overcharging. Right? So this is called the ghabn al-fahish. Right? So overcharging is ghabn. Is when you charge beyond the market price. So let's say this battery pack sells for $50. Some may sell it for $100. Some may sell it for $60. But if the battery pack's market price is $50, there would be a price beyond which it's not sold in the marketplace. Right? So, that price, when it goes beyond the market price, that's called ghabn. Right? This is beyond the market price. That's overcharging. So, basically, you can sell anything for any price as long as you don't deceive the other party. And so the general principle is you can sell anything for any price as long as you do not deceive the other party. That is the principle. However, it is recommended to have nasiha. Nasiha is recommended that you keep the other party's interest in mind. So you would, and that would be that even if you charge a generous price, but you keep it within the market price, because the other person might not know better. But ultimately, who's responsible for taking care of their best interest? Right? Like
The one buying.
Yeah, the one buying. So Uncle Latif said, I really like this power bank. I said, well, I don't want to sell it, but if you pay me $100, you can take it. If he willingly pays, did I deceive him? Did I cheat him? Did I cheat you, Sidi Abdul Latif?
No.
Right? So if you owe, the nasiha would be from nasiha not to do that. I say, by the way, the market, if I told you, look, the market price is around $50, but I really like this. They no longer make this kind. So if you pay $100, you can take it. So that would be nasiha, right? I want to, if you want to buy it, this is how much I'm charging, but the market price is that much. That's nasiha. Either charge within the market price, even the upper end of the market price, or tell the person. But that's not obligatory. It's your call. Right? However, if you charge more than the market price and deceive the other person, then there is the option. This is, of course, sinful, and there's the option of cancellation. So this is a beneficial issue that's mentioned in Tanwir al-Absar, and the commentators both quote this beneficial fara. The commentators, Shaykh Zada in Majma' al-Anhur and Imam al-Haskafi, which is as follows. In Tanwir al-Absar, he says, لا رد, this is not from our method, this is from Tanwir al-Absar. لا رد بغبن فاحش في ظاهر الرواية. In ظاهر الرواية, the transmitted position of our madhab is that just charging a gross overcharging, which is nobody charges that much in the market. There's no option of cancellation due to this. But the fatwa is, that's all that's come in Zahir Riwayah about this, but وَيُفْتَى بِالرَّدِّ إِنْ غَرَّهُ. But if there was overcharging, right, which is i.e. that which is beyond market valuation, so nobody in the market sells it for this much, right, in the regular market. If it was accompanied by deception, تغرير, right, تغرير in غره, right, there will be the option of cancellation. So you told, how would it be deception? If you say, and this is a good price. A good price would be within the market valuation, right? Because certain things, discount stores would sell it for less, but if you go to a slightly fancier store, they'd sell it for more, etc. And that, of course, is also sinful. So we have to be morally careful about these things as well. Any questions here before we move to the next section? And there's a reading related to this that we've given. It's been added to this this lesson, right? So overcharging is that which is beyond any market valuation. If there's deception involved, then there's a right to cancel the contract. But if there's no deception involved, there's no right of annulment over here. So there's a question, what is the basis of an at-cost sale when the seller does not make a profit? He wants to get rid of his merchandise, right? Like, let's say he wants to sell, so he said, this is a good deal. I'm not making any profit on this for you. They could do it for different reasons, right? Sellers, like, why do people sell some things at a loss? It's very famous, Costco sells their chickens at, their rotisserie chicken. I mean, we don't have it because it's not halal, but let's say there's a Al-Quds supermarket, they sell halal rotisserie chicken at a loss. Why would they do that? And let's say they announce, we're selling you this chicken on condition that we are making no profit on it. We got it for $5, we're selling it to you for $5, let's say, or whatever the price would be. But traders have different interests. One of them being that you want to establish a relationship. Look, I'm giving you a good deal, to establish a relationship of trust, for example. Or they could sell something at cost and they profit from other things. So those are maqasid tujar. The traders have different reasons why they sell different things for different prices. Okay. Now there's an interesting chapter or section on dealing with the item of sale and its price. And there are some important principles related to transactions that arise here. One of them is selling something before taking possession of it. وَلَا يَصِحُّ بَيْعُ الْمَنْقُولِ قَبْلَ قَبْضِهِ. It is not permissible to sell a transferable item before taking possession of it, because a transferable item could perish. So for example, you really like this tasbih. So I showed it to you, you like it, but see, Masir lives in the US, I'm in Canada, so I sell him the tasbih. Now once it's sold, who does it belong to? To see, Masir, I sell you this tasbih for $50. Please accept.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Right? So he accepted the sale. Now, but before you take possession of it, what would I have to do if I'm in Canada and you're in the US? I have to send it to you. Is there a possibility that it might not get to you? Yeah. And let's say if you went ahead and sold it to somebody else, and they sold it to somebody else, and the problem is the original item didn't get to the person, it could lead to all kinds of disputes and so on. So there's a prophetic prohibition against selling that which you have not taken possession of, lest it lead to to disputes, etc. So you cannot sell that which you have not taken possession of. But the hadiths about it have been taken to refer to transferable items. So he says, وَيَصِحُّ فِي الْعَقَارِ خِلَافًا لِمُحَمَّدٍ. But it's allowed to sell allowed to sell property before taking possession of it. Because the hadith is considered to relate to what? It's considered to relate to the issue of it's considered to relate to the issue of the danger of perishing. But property itself, is there much danger of it perishing? Land, a building, etc.? No. So that's how the hadith is interpreted. And they say if there's property that, for example, you're buying you're buying the property that is in immediate danger of perishing, but that's unlikely. Khilafan li Muhammad, as opposed to Imam Muhammad stuck with the outward purport of the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ forbade selling that which you have not taken possession of. He applied it both to transferable items and non-transferable items, i.e. property, like land or building, etc. Okay, and the reason being the possibility of not getting it. Also, in order to avoid dispute or one party getting wronged, وَمَنِ اشْتَرَى كَيْلِيًا كَيْلًا أي بشرط الكيل. So if someone buys an item that's sold by volume, a كيلا meaning بشرط الكيل, لا يجوز له بيعه ولا أكله حتى يكيله. In this case, one can nor can they consume the item until they weigh it. And it's sufficient that it be weighed in by the seller in the buyer's presence after the agreement. Right? So he says, وَكَفَى كَيْلُ الْبَائِعِ بَعْدَ الْعَقْدِ بِحَضْرَتِهِ هُوَ الصَّحِيحِ. And it's sufficient that the original seller weigh it after the agreement. This is if it's sold on condition of weight. If you buy a bag of rice for like a 10 kilo bag of rice, do you have to weigh it to sell it? The answer is no. Why? Because in this case, this bag of rice is it being sold on condition of the weight?
No.
No. Here the weight is simply a description. The scenario would be let's say you go to the farmer's market. You say, I'd like 10 kilos of those golden apples. Right? So there you're selling on condition of weight. So the person said, this is 10 kilos of apples. And there's no weighing that's taken place after the contract's done. What's the possibility? That the seller's son came and ate one apple and gave an apple to his younger sister. And these are big apples, so there's half a kilo missing. Right? And then, or the buyer, what did he do? He bought 10 kilos of apples. Someone said, oh, those look like really good apples. So, okay, here, I sell you 10 kilos of apples for $20. And that second guy, when he goes home, he weighs it. He said, there's half a kilo missing. So these lead to dispute. So this principle applies and is based on hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that you can find that you cannot consume an item that's sold by volume or by weight on condition of volume or weight until you weigh it yourself. And the better thing is for it to be weighed in the majlis of the contract. And this applies to volume and it applies to weight as well. وَمِثْلُهُ الْوَزْنِيُّ, and likewise something sold by weight. وَالْعَدَدِيُّ, and likewise something sold by number. And likewise, but not something that is sold by length. Because things sold by length, as we said, is a descriptor of something. So you bought a thobe and said it is 48. Let's say it's this length. The length is a descriptor. It's not a condition. Like jeans that are 56 inches are not, versus 60 inches. The price doesn't vary according to that length. Right? It's a descriptor, and we covered that earlier in the chapter. You could look at that if the item ends up being more or less. So you purchased, let's say, that Uncle Latif really liked these power banks. So he says, I'd like to buy 100 of these power banks for $50 each. So we agreed. So I give him a box. These are 100 power banks. The cautious thing is, before you part, we should count them after the contract. So that's the best thing to do. But before Uncle Latif starts using it, before he starts selling it off, that these are 100 power banks, he goes, sells it off to somebody else. This is a box of 100 power banks. And then they go and sell it off. It could lead to a chain of dispute. Count it. Right? Count it. So in things that are sold on condition of weight and volume, this is obvious. But it is this practical caution with other things. You got food delivery of certain items. Before you jump into the meal, make sure everything is there. And you ate everything, and then you say, oh, by the way, the burgers, there was one cheeseburger missing. But there's no cheeseburgers left. Because you guys, so count the things that you purchase to make sure everything is there before you move on. Best thing to do is to inspect that within the majlis of the contract. But likewise, you got a home delivery, etc. Make sure everything is there before. Now, we usually, especially if you are going to sell it off to somebody else, but also because you start consuming, then you say something was missing. And then it leads to dispute between you and the seller, and it harms relations, etc., or breaks trust. So this is something that before you start using something, verify that everything in the contract was delivered to you. So that has a wider application as well. Okay. وصح التصرف في الثمن قبل قبضه وصح الحط منه والزيادة فيه حال قيام المبيع. It is valid to deal with the price before taking possession of it. Because if the price, were to perish, it can be substituted. If it's money, it's very obvious, right? So I'll buy the power bank for these $50. If these $50 were stolen, what's the solution? What's the solution?
Replace the 50.
Yeah, replace the 50. But if the price was, because the price is not the subject of the transaction, right? Let's say Uncle Latif purchases this power bank for, there's this conceptually really cool thing. You guys know about these? You can use it to hang things, etc. Right? I forget what they're called, right? So he sells it for this. This is the price. But then Uncle Latif dropped it in the drain. So then we'd say, okay, how much is the market value of this? Either gives me another one or the market value of this. Right? Because the price is simply the means to the transaction. Price could be money, but even if it's a commodity, you give the equivalent of it, the like of it, or its market value. And so you can transact in the price before, so the buyer can transact in the price before taking possession of it, and they can adjust the contract. So you can reduce the price or agree to increase it. As long as the item of sale remains حالة قيام المبيع, as long as the مبيع, the item of sale, remains. لا بعد هلاكه, but not after it has perished. So the principle that arises from that you can adjust the terms of the contract, but on the condition of mutual agreement. Right? On the basis of mutual agreement. ويتعلق الاستحقاق بكل ذلك, and any rights of third parties that arise relate to all of it. Istihqaq, the term istihqaq refers to the rights of a third party besides the transacting party. This would be things like the right of preemption, حق الشفعة, would relate to the whole agreed upon price. فيرابح ويولي على الكل إن زيد وعلى ما بقي إن حط. So you'd engage in murabaha or tawliya on the adjusted price if you increased, and what remains if you reduce the price. So this is the consequence. The fa here is of tafsil, of consequence. Okay. So you can adjust the price afterwards. Okay. وَمَنْ قَالَ, now in sales sometimes people want guarantees. So وَمَنْ قَالَ بِعْ عَبْدَكَ مِنْ زَيْدْ بِأَلْفٍ وَزِيَادَةَ مِنْهُ. So if someone says, sell your abd to Zayd for 1,000, على أني, on condition that I will be the guarantor for such and such extent of the price. Right? سوى الألف, besides the 1,000. He takes 1,000 from Zayd, and the seller takes the remaining from this other party. Okay. Why? Because this guy wants to encourage or facilitate the sale. وَإِن لَمْ يَقُلْ مِنَ الثَّمَنِ, and if he says, if not off the price, فَالْأَلْفُ عَلَى زَيْدٍ وَلَا شَيْءَ عَلَيْهِ. But this is, right, because what's the key expression here? Right? The key expression here is he's saying min al-thaman, off the price. He's saying off the price, right? Min al-thaman. So Uncle Abdul Latif really wants to buy this power bank, but it's a very much fancier power bank now. It's $100. I don't want to sell it. So Uncle Latif said, okay, I'll buy it for 80. I'm not interested. So Uncle Masir comes and said, look, he says to me, sell it to Uncle Latif for 80 and I will cover $20 of the price. If I say I'll cover $20 of the price, so then I agree to the sale. It's as if by this person who say I'll cover $20 off the price, and at least in Arabic what it connotes is that I will take $80 from Uncle Latif and the $20 being given by Uncle Masir is from the price as well. And that's the only reason I agreed to the transaction. So I'm taking 80 from Uncle Latif, $20 from Masir. Wadih? On the other hand, if I didn't say off the price, if Uncle Masir didn't say off the price, has to pay 1,000 and the other person owes nothing. And rather, the rulings of kafala could apply if the conditions are fulfilled. If the conditions are fulfilled, meaning that, it's as if I've just said to be a guarantor that, say, Uncle Latif says, I'd like to buy this. I said, it's $100. He says 80. I said, I'm hesitant. So Uncle Masir says, sell it to him for 80. I'll be a guarantor for 20. Did he say, he says, I'll cover, in our times, for example, we say, I'll cover 20 more. 20 more, it's above the price. So I'll guarantee 20 of it. Right? So the price due is only 80. He just said, I'll guarantee 20 of it. So that's all I can only demand from this guarantor if the buyer did not pay up. And that follows the ahkam of kafala, of being a guarantor, if it counts as a kafala, as being a guarantor, because you can be a guarantor for the full price. You can also be a guarantor for part of the price. Okay. So that's guaranteeing part of the price. وكل دين أجل بأجل معلوم صح تأجيله إلا القرض إلا في الوصية. Okay, so there's a general principle. He says that every debt, if deferred, with a known period of deferral, it is valid to do so. So it is valid to defer debts to a known period of deferral. So basically, we're selling the power bank today, right? The power bank was $200. So we made a sale for $200. Then Uncle Latif puts his hand in his pocket and says, you know what, Shaykh Faraz, I don't actually have $200. Now I'm worried he may want to ask for it back. So I said, okay, I'll defer it to you for 6 months. Or you can pay it in 4 installments of $50. So we agree to a known deferral, it's valid. That's wadih, right? There's money owed. We defer it. It's valid as long as the period of deferral is known. Except for what? Except for the qard. And this seems counterintuitive. The qard, which is the loan. So Islamically, in of itself, you're not supposed to set a binding you're not supposed to set a binding a contractual period of repayment. What is a qard often referred to as? They usually add a descriptor to calling it a qard. And what is that?
Qard Hasan.
Yeah, they very frequently refer to it as qard hasan. And so a loan, like, a qard, a loan is essentially a charitable act. A loan is essentially a charitable act. Right? And when a loan takes place, initially, is there any exchange if a loan is given? You borrow $100, like $100,000 from somebody. Initially, is there an exchange between two parties in a loan? No, right? So this is considered tabarru'. Right? And so there's two types of contracts in general. There's contracts of exchange. These are called uqud al-mu'awada with a dad. Uqud al-mu'awada. Contracts of exchange. Each party is giving something in the contract. Contracts of exchange are binding contracts. Right? And there's uqud al-tabarru'. Unilateral contracts are not binding. What would be an example of that? Lending something. If I said, Sidi Masir, I'll lend you my tasbih for 6 months, and we put it in writing, is the 6 months binding on me that I cannot ask for my sibha back for 6 months? Is that binding?
No.
No, because it's my property. You did not pay for you did not buy it, you're not renting it, you didn't give any exchange for it. Now, if you really wanted to keep it for 6 months, you would rent it out, for example, right? But so in a loan, if you look at it in terms of the beginning, it's one part. It's a unilateral contract where only one party is giving something. So the deferral is not binding there. That's in terms of its ibtida. But at the end of it, when I go to repay Uncle Jamil the $100,000, it's an exchange of money for money, right? I took $100,000, and now I'm repaying $100,000. And we'll see in the section on riba, if there's an exchange of like for like, from the same category, then you cannot defer. Right? So when there's an exchange of like for like, deferral is not permitted because it resembles riba. Because in riba, there's two things. If there's an exchange of like for like, it has to be at par and you cannot defer it. So that would apply to money as well. So the initial part is that it's not binding, that's easy. But at the end of it, it resembles riba, and that which resembles riba is treated as riba when it comes to matters of riba because of the necessary caution. Okay. because of the necessary caution. So that's the theory. And that is the theory. Inside wasiyah, we would say that, like if someone dies and they give a bequest that lend this much money to my brother because you have to help him, you pay off his debts, etc. So in the wasiyah, someone's wasiyah, like in their will, they can give a loan with a deferral because wasiyah is based on facilitation. And they're not benefiting from it anyway. They're dead once this happens. So that's the theoretical component. Practically, we can't really apply this in our times, right? Because sadly, people do not fulfill their commitments as they are supposed to as believers. That's the reality. So if someone wants to exercise caution, what they would do, they would break down a loan agreement into two parts. There's the loan itself, and that's a contract. And they would have another promissory agreement appended with it, where the terms of repayment would be defined. Can you make a promise to repay within such time? Yes. But the problem with that is that if people find out, well, a promise is not binding, etc., they will also not fulfill that. So the ulama give fatwa in our times based on positions taken from the Maliki school that you can contractually stipulate a period of deferral, an ajal, for the qard. And the reason, so what's a precautionary way of doing that? If you want to give a loan and you want to stick to the Hanafi school, but you want to agree on terms of when it's repaid, what would you do, Sadati?
You would have a promissory note separate from the contract.
Yeah, so you'd have the promissory note separate from the contract. That freaks people out too. Like if you're taking, like you have some growth project as a non-profit and you're taking some qard hasan on, you separate it into two and you say, and we, so some people, it may freak them out. Now, if you can do that, that's better, but in many cases you can't. So the fatwa given, you can see the AOFI guidelines and the ulama discuss it. Now there's some Hanafi scholars who get very upset with it, but there's leeway within the madhahib, and the fact that, the consideration of urf, number one, of custom, but number two, consideration of umum al-balwa. That's instead of a ribawi contract, someone's giving you money at par. But they just wanted to know when you'll have it back. That's in of itself, that's a reasonable request. So, especially given the prevalence of riba, the fact that there's some element of resemblance to riba by setting a deferral is not riba itself. It's just a shubha of riba, but that's much less than people falling into actual riba. So the fatwa is given that you could set it, though establishing, like having a contract plus a promissory agreement separate would be better. ولا يصح التأجيل إلى مجهول متفاحش كهبوب الريح. You cannot defer to unknown dates that are grossly unknown. That when the stormy season begins is when I'll repay you the debt. Right? So that's grossly unknown. ويصح في المتقارب كالحصاد ونحوه. But in a deferral, right? So a debt was owed or a debt arose, but then you deferred it to something with a minor uncertainty, such as harvest season. Because does the harvest season vary significantly? No. So you can defer a debt. It's already due. But you could defer it to a time period where there's minor uncertainty, such as harvest, etc., because this will not lead to significant dispute. So we saw a number of of important points. Next lesson we'll be looking at riba. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. This is a very important investigation. I'll be doing a supplementary class outside of these lessons on the prohibition of riba and some background. And this is taken from, it's based primarily upon Mufti Taqi's treatise on riba, which is it's given a very strange title because there's his historic context in Pakistan for it. It's an important title. See, Abdul Latif, do we have it now on Seeker's Guidance?
It's not complete yet.
Okay. Can we give 24 hours to get that done, please?
Yes.
Okay. Tawakkalna ala Allah. And so we can share the link as it is right now. Once we have the resource, we'll add it as a resource to the course, inshallah. Just take ownership of that. So this article is a bit long, but it's very beneficial. I'll be covering that in a supplementary class. We'll announce it, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, most likely Sunday evening. And you can listen to it separate from the lesson. But because this covers the rulings of riba in this classical implementation, but understanding the verses prohibiting it, why it was prohibited, what is riba understood to be, its contemporary applications. And the executive summary is that there's nothing more sternly prohibited in the Quran and the Sunnah after associating partners with Allah and showing enmity to the awliya of Allah than riba. Why? Because riba does not simply have individual harm. Someone says, well, I just financed the home, like, who am I harming? But you become party to a global system of oppression. Wars are fought not just to take over land, etc. There are people who finance wars. And they finance wars to make money. How? Through usury. People finance chaos and corruption around the world through riba. Right? It is the institution of mass destruction. What fuels mass destruction at the political level, economic level, is riba. If you had a closed model where there's just two categories of people in the world, it's a very simplistic model, but there's some people who are wealthy and they lend money on riba, and there's people who are poor and they borrow money on riba. What would happen to wealth? So there's people who are wealthy and they lend their money on riba, and there's people who are poor who, in order to ever richer, and the poor would get ever poorer. And that's what happens. Why is there, one of the key causes of systematic, nation level economic underdevelopment. One of the key drivers of that is, of course, this is kufr, number one. Number two is riba. And riba funds that which is of immediate gain. So things like gross entertainment, etc., that which appeals to the whims and is immediate, Why are house prices around the world everywhere beyond reckoning? Because of riba and the speculative mindset that it stirs. So we'll be looking at that further, but this is very destructive. We have a reader on riba as well. It's something to pause and reflect upon. And if one fell into it and didn't realize the gravity of it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, right, that one ceases and desists and commits to sensibly rectify. And we have resources on that. We'll stop here بإذن الله تعالى وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وبارك الله تعالى فيكم.